بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. الحمد لله نحمد الله سبحانه وتعالى ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. Alhamdulillah, Ramadan Mubarak, and welcome again to the next chapter in this. What I thought I'd do is just do a very quick review, because I'm finishing this section, and then day after tomorrow when we start again, I'm beginning on the second section, which is quite different from this one. So just to recap very quickly, Muhammad ibn Ahmad bin Juzayy al-Kalbi was a great 8th century scholar. He died in 741, and he was from Andalusia, which, as you know, for over 700 years, and really even longer than that, given that the Muslims remained in Spain as crypto-Muslims for quite some time. And this is why people that live in California see Arabic names in many places in California, because when the Spaniards came here, they actually named it California after the Khalifa, which is a historical fact. So it's actually a kind of Spanish hybrid word, which means land of the Caliph, California. I'm not making that up. So he died defending the lands of Islam against the northern aggression against the Muslims there. And he wrote this book, At-Taseel li-Ulum al-Tanzeel. It's usually printed in, there's actually a 1-volume edition, and then a 2-volume, and then a 4-volume. But it's become a much more popular tafsir than it was in the past. It was more known in North Africa and not so much in other places. But he's an extraordinary scholar, and he basically gave us an overview of what he considered to be really a map of the Quran. And he first establishes the idea that the Quran, he gives you a definition of the Quran, which is da'wat al-khalq ila ibadat al-haq. It's the invitation to creation, to the worship of their creator. And then he talks about that you need to know what the worship is, who the creator is, and what the worship that he's invited you to is. So that's knowing the khaliq and knowing the deen itself. And then providing bawa'ith, or incentives for doing that. And so he has the targhib and tarhib, which are the 2 dominant ways that human beings are motivated, what we call in our culture the stick and the carrot, basically a promise and a threat. And then he looks in detail at what he calls the 7 really subjects, maqasid al-Quran. And he identifies them as the first one being ilm al-rububiyyah, to explain who our Lord is, and then nubuwwah, to explain who the prophets are and what prophecy is, and who they were and why they came, and then the ma'ad, which is the resurrection, and then the ahkam, which are all the legal rulings, the wa'ad, which is the promise, and the wa'id, which is the threat, and finally qasas, because human beings are people that are motivated by stories, that stories are very important in all our civilizations. The storytellers are part of every culture and every civilization. And the great civilizations are founded usually upon books that have creation stories, myths in them. I mean, the great Hyperborean religions of the north, or the religions like of India, these great traditions that have these stories of where we came from. And then he goes into what is the rububiyyah, affirms the existence of the maker, explains the creation, affirms the unicity of God, in other words, his oneness, refutes those who associate powers with him, provides the attributes of God. These are all from him. With the prophecy, confirms the prophethood of the prophets in general, confirms the prophethood of our Prophet Muhammad in particular, and then confirms the scriptures that God revealed to them. So we believe, obviously, in the Suhuf of Ibrahim, in the Torah, the Tanakh of the Jews, And then in the Psalms of Dawood, which is part of it's not part of the Torah, but it's part of what we call the Old Testament now. And then the Gospel, the Injil of Isa alayhi salam, and finally the Furqan. And then we recognize that there's other traditions. Also the existence of angels that really are the unseen movers and shakers in the world. They do a lot of things. And then refutes the arguments of the disbelievers. And then the Ma'ad is about the resurrection, gives proofs for the resurrection, refutes those. And then getting into the Ahkam, we went through the 5 types of Ahkam, and then the Ahkam that relate to our body, the physical rules, to wealth, and then to our hearts. And then we looked at the Wa'ad and the Wa'id. And then now we're in the Qasas. So this is where we left off yesterday. And so the stories, the Qasas, نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص. We're telling you the best stories, because human beings, Plato, the Greek philosopher, said that give me the stories you tell your children and I'll give you your culture. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but basically what he said is that the stories that you give a culture are going to define that culture. So when you look, for instance, we wonder why this is an extremely violent place. We wonder why there's so much aggression and all these. Well, look at the stories that people are fed through the media. If you look at why there's so much, in most cultures, people don't rebel against parents. I mean, they have they have to find themselves and their identities and everything, so they'll go through these transitional periods. But generally, you do not find the type of deep filial impiety that you find in Western civilization. And a lot of that has to do with just the stories that they're given, because so many of the stories that they're given, so many of the films, the television programs, they see children speaking out, getting angry at their parents, all these things. That's not a foregone conclusion. That's something that's learned behavior. And so stories are very important. And that's why stories, there's really a moral obligation of the storyteller. The storyteller, the people that write, if you look at the great literature always has deep meanings and philosophical truths that are in it. They're not necessarily didactic. Great writers don't tend to spell things out for you. They let you work them out yourself. But if you study, for instance, even somebody like Shakespeare is teaching ethics very often through negative stories, like showing you, like Macbeth is a really good example of somebody who breaks the rule of hospitality, and kills the king based on what some demons, these witches, who told him, and they lied to him, they tricked him, which is what the demons always do. And then his wife is, unsex me now, and she's become, I guess she's a non-gendered female, because that's what she says, unsex me now. But Lady Macbeth is an incredible study, and just a horrible type woman that goads her husband on to do something that he knows is wrong, and then it's horrible. She commits suicide, and then he's like, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day. I mean, he's like in nihilism, right? Nothing means anything. So he's showing you what happens when you take that path. Like, it's a really bad way to go down. But now stories, you have evil people that are heroes now in stories, and you have gangsters that people are made to like based on how could you not like Don Corleone, right? But that's what they do. They make the negative, they make the dark likable, and it's horrible. And that's why something like, Tolkien, who was a very devout Catholic, his story is about good versus evil, and good prevails. So the Quran has these stories because they're important, and they're the best stories because they're stories of virtue overcoming vice, of truth overcoming falsehood, of the prophets overcoming the disbelievers, of Moses overcoming Pharaoh. Pharaoh is drowned. He comes to naught. And so that's one of the most important aspects of these stories is that they're stories to teach us. Now the stories are told, it's not a linear, Quran is not linear, but it has a deep structure. And this is where the mystical component comes in, because the more you study the Quran, the deeper the structure gets. And so when you see how the stories are spread out, they're spread out for a reason. And each place reiterates the story, but always has something. It's either shortened or it's heightened, or there's something that's focused on that's not focused on in another place. So the conciseness shows you the rhetoric, the power of the Quran rhetorically to teach you something with ijaz. And then what's called itanab. Ijaz would be the conciseness in rhetoric, and then the itanab is to give you a kind of copious account of something where you're adding more information. So both are used. One is used to get a message that's very pertinent and specific, whereas the other one, it adds to it the nuances in it. And I'll show you some of these in a second. So, and then a story told in one place may have a detail not found in another place, so then in each of them there's a particular benefit. The stories are told for particular aims, so they are repeated in accordance with the numerous aims. So when we look at this, here I want to look at some of the recurring stories and why they recur. The stories are told for particular aims, so they're repeated in accordance with the numerous aims. So affirming the prophethood of previous prophets by telling of the miracles that took place at their hands. So we know Moses had a staff. He threw down the staff. He showed his hand. His hand was white without leprosy or vitiligo or something. It was bighayri su'in. There was no harm with it, you know. And then he was given the 9 ayahs. So he was given the 2 ayahs for Pharaoh, but given the 9 ayahs for the people of Egypt. And they're both mentioned, the 2 ayahs and the 9 ayahs, in different, because that's an example of where one is to Pharaoh and the other is to the whole people of Egypt. And then stating the various ways in which those who rejected the prophets were destroyed. So some of them, right, هَذَا عَرِضٌ, you know, they saw the rain, they said, هَذَا عَرِضٌ مُمْطِرُنَا, oh, a nice rain, and then the rain wipes them out. You know, it was a storm that killed them. رِيح, drowning, plagues, you know, all these different ways that people are destroyed. So these are warnings. This is the wa'id, the component. And then affirming the unity of God, right? Confirming the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ through his ability to convey this history without being taught. Like he had no knowledge. And some of them later, like who knew the Pharaoh was preserved in his body, like mummies? I mean, that's, the Quran says that, you know, we're going to preserve you in your body to be a sign for the people that come later. Who told the Prophet ﷺ that? Because that was discovered later. Also, like, who told the Prophet about casting lots with Zechariah, you know, for the kafala? All these things that there's no way the Prophet ﷺ could have known them. And one of the things, even Hans Kuhn mentions that we have a paradox, because we know the Ebionites, the early Semitic Christians, disappeared in the 3rd century, and you have no trace of them. And yet, he says that Ebionitic Christianity shows up in the 7th century Arabia with the Quran. So he said, where's the historical link? He said it's a problem, like for Christians, like how did that happen? It happened from our perspective because he was given revelation, it's wahi. But that is a question. And then, you know, they say, oh, the Prophet just took from the Bible. Why does he edit so much, and why is he so consistent in his editing? Because he didn't take everything from the Bible. I mean, there's whole things that are edited out. So why is there the editing? Like, why aren't the stories of the prophets doing the dastardly things that, according to the Old Testament, some of the Old Testament writings say that they did? And yet the Quran rejects that and says, no, those are alterations or That's the dominant view, and the other view is that they're just misinterpretations of the actual whatever was being stated. So, and then the considering the power of God and the severity of His punishment for those who reject His message, very important, one of the messages of the Quran. Consoling the Prophet, I mentioned that about the, إن الذي فرض عليك القرآن لرادوك إلى معاد. That's an example of consolation where the Prophet is being told, look, you're being kicked out, but there's a wisdom here, and I will return you, just like I returned Musa, Moses to Musa, to Moses' mother. And then engendering the fear of punishment in those who reject God's message as those before them were punished, presenting the wondrous events of the prophets and their disputes with those who rejected the message. So, so now I just want to look at a few just to show you some of these what appear to be repetitions, but in fact are not. So, for instance, in Surah Al-A'raf, it says that it says here, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى إِذَا اسْتَسْقَاهُ قَوْمُهُ أَنْ اضْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْحَجَرَ. So we revealed to Moses, when his people sought drinking water from him in the desert, strike the stone with your staff. So he's told to strike the stone with his staff. And then it says, فَانْبَجَسَتْ مِنْهُ فَانْبَجَسَتْ مِنْهُ 12 عَيْنًا قد علم كل أناس مشربهم وظللنا عليهم الغمام وأنزلنا عليهم المن والسلوى كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم وما ظلمونا ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون. So here the ayah ends with saying they were ungrateful. We gave them all these blessings. We gave them the manna and the quail, and despite that, they oppressed themselves. So if you look in Surah Al-Baqarah, it says, وَإِذَا اسْتَسْقَى مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ. Recall how Moses sought drinking water in the desert for his people. So now Moses is seeking it for his people, right? There the people asked Moses, right? So it's letting you know that he's answering the request of his, and this is what prophets do, they serve their people, right? So فَقُلْنَا اضْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْحَجَرَ. Okay, so far it's the same. فَانْفَجَرَتْ مِنْهُ. But here it says فَانْفَجَرَتْ. فانفجرت منه 12 عينا قد علم كل أناس مشربهم. There's the same. But now Allah says كلوا واشربوا من رزق الله ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين. So they haven't gone astray yet. He's telling them don't sow corruption. But in the other one he says that they ما ظلمناهم ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون. They were the oppressors. So anfajarat means that it burst forth and flowed freely and strongly. Imbajasat means that it flowed but then it diminished with their sins. So the imbijas is that the flow actually diminished the more they sinned. And so these are the type of nuances that you're going to find in the repetition. So to look at another one, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says to Moses, and Moses is the most repeated story in the Quran with Pharaoh because that is the world. It's Moses and Pharaoh, right? It's, I have a Palestinian sister here. So, this is the story of the world. It's Moses. And also to remember, amongst the Pharaoh's people, there's people that believe. So even in the Pharaoh's inner circle, there was a mu'min min ali Fir'aun. He was amongst the people of Pharaoh. So the Quran is nuanced in that way. And then there's bad people amongst the people of Moses. So it's never Manichaean. The Quranic worldview is never Manichaean. It's never black and white. It's always recognizing the nuances of the world. But this is the confrontation between Pharaoh and Moses. This is always, and you choose your sides, and you can't fence it, because if you fence it, you're on the Pharaoh's side by being neutral in a moral crisis. You know, they say the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who are neutral in a moral crisis. You know, I don't know if that's true, but it's a nice reminder. So he says here that and so Moses, you know, said, وَقَالَ مُوسَى يَا فِرْعَوْنُ إِنِّي رَسُولٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. So I am a messenger from the Lord of the world. حَقِيقٌ عَلَى أَلَّا أَقُولَ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْحَقِّ. And I'm obliged to say nothing about God but the truth. Right? So he's telling him, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you the truth. And then he says, you know, that I have come with قَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِبَيِّنَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. I've come with a clear proof from your Lord. فَأَرْسِلْ مَعِي بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. So set free the children of Israel. And this is also in the Bible mentioned. So what's his sign? You know, قَالَ إِن كُنْتَ جِئْتَ بِآيَةٍ فَأْتِ بِهَا. So he says, if you have a sign, let's see it. إِن كُنْتَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ, if you're truthful. فَأَلْقَ عَصَاهُ فَإِذَا هِيَ ثُعْبَانٌ مُبِينٌ. So he threw down the staff, and it was a manifest thu'ban. Thu'ban is a giant snake, like an anaconda or a python. It's a huge snake. And so that's what he says there. And then وَنَزَعْ يَدَهُ, and then he takes out فَإِذَا هِيَ بَيْضَاءُ لِلنَّاظِرِينَ. And so that's there. And then in Taha, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the meeting with Musa alayhi salam and asks him, you know, what's in your right hand? Allah knows what's in his right hand. But he asks him, مَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا مُوسَى قَالَ هِيَ عَصَايَ تَوَكَّأُ عَلَيْهَا وَأَهُشُّ بِهَا عَلَى غَنَمِي وَلِي فِيهَا مَآرِبُ أُخْرَى قَالَ أَلْقِيهَا يَا مُوسَى فَأَلْقَاهَا فَإِذَا هِيَ حِيَّةٌ تَسْعَى. So here it's a little snake. Now, there's two reasons for that. One, if it was a thu'ban, it might have created a real fear in Musa himself, because this is the first time he's seeing the miracle. So it's a little snake that's moving, tasa, quickly. So this is going to be less frightening from if it suddenly was a giant snake. It would be terrifying for him. And then what does Allah say? قال خذها ولا تخاف. Take it and have no fear. Right? So he's letting him know. سَنُعِيدُهَا سِيرَتَهَا الْأُولَى. You know, we'll return it to its original. So he takes it as a staff again. Right? So that is an example. Now finally, this is the third time. So there's 3 times that this is mentioned in the Quran. The first time is in terms of the books, is confronting Moses. But before that, the first time in terms of time dimension, because remember, there's no past, present, or future for God. It's all one for God. And so the Quran is past, present, and future. It's non-linear. So there's things that he'll tell you before that are after in terms of our experience. But with God, they're all in immediate knowledge with God. It's just the eternal now. And so there's no... So he says... in this third one, so let's see what you have, and he throws it down, right? And so they tell him that he's a sahir, right? And so when they bring the Sahara, they say, who's going to throw first? And he says, قَالَ لَهُمْ مُوسَى أَلْقُوا مَا أَنْتُمْ مُلْقُونَ. You throw down what you're going to throw down. فَأَلْقَوْا حِبَالَهُمْ
وَعِصِيَّهُم. So they threw down their ropes and staffs, right? And وَقَالُوا بِعِزَّةِ فِرْعَوْنَ. And they say, by Fir'aun's greatness, by his power, by the invincible might of Pharaoh. إِنَّا لَنَحْنُ الْغَالِبُونَ. Because they want money, they were promised they're going to get a reward. This is classic, just human, just the pathetic human nature in all its display here. فَأَلْقَى مُوسَى عَصَاهُ فَإِذَا هِيَ تَلْقَفُ مَا يَفِكُونَ. So here, it's not mentioned what. And the ulama say it was a hayya in its speed and a thu'ban in its size. So it has both qualities of this. So that's an example, again, of these different, now, of different stories, but each one is nuanced. Now, if you look again here with Ibrahim alayhi salam, it says, هل أتاك حديث ضيف إبراهيم المكرمين. Okay, so now it tells you, has it come to you the story of Abraham, the honored guests of Abraham, right? Al-Mukramin. So then it says, إِذْ دَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَقَالُوا سَلَامًا. They come in and they say peace. قَالَ السَّلَامُ. And then he says, قَوْمٌ مُنْكَرُونَ. They were people he didn't recognize, right? Munkarun here means unknown, because munkar is something that you don't know. Ma'ruf is what you know, munkar is what you don't know. So in healthy societies, the ma'ruf is virtue and munkar is vice, because you don't see vice in a healthy society. And that's why the Prophet said towards the end of time, ma'ruf would become munkar and munkar would become ma'ruf. So what people know is vice, not virtue. That's one of the signs of the end of time. So there he says, قَوْمٌ مُنْكَرُونَ فَرَاغَ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ فَجَاءَ بِعِجْلٍ سَمِينٍ فَقَرَّبَهُ إِلَيْهِمْ قَالَ أَلَا تَأْكُلُونَ فَأَوْجَسَ مِنْهُمْ خِيفَةً قَالُوا لَا تَخَافْ وَبَشِّرُوهُ. يعني, so he offers them food, and now to the people of the desert, if you offer food and the guest refuses it, they intend evil. That's why he said, أوجس في نفسه خيفة. He feels some fear, because if they ate, people, in that tradition, if you ate from a man's plate, you're not gonna do him harm, because it would be, again, that breach of hospitality. These are ancient traditions, and so there, this is what he said. Now, if you go back to Surah Al-Hijr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَبِّئْهُمْ عَنْ ضَيْفِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. And he doesn't say al-Mukramin. So here, the focus is not on the karam of Ibrahim. The purpose is another purpose. إِذْ دَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَقَالُوا سَلَامًا. Now, in the other one, he replies the salam, but that's not the point here. قَالَ إِنَّا مِنْكُمْ وَجِلُونَ. The point here is fear. So he removes the return of the salam, and he removes the fact that he honored them in his house by bringing them things, because now the focus is on the fear in Ibrahim. And this is, we all know this. When you tell a story, we will tell stories in different ways based on what we want to get out of the story. So even humans do this. So we'll omit things that are not relevant to what we're trying to say in that story. And this is what, because balagha, rhetoric in our tradition, balagha is mutabaqat al-kalam muqtada al-hal. It's the relationship of the words that you are speaking, that they correspond to the muqtada al-hal. So for instance, in the adhan, when Umar radiallahu anhu, as-salatu khayrun min al-nawm. So some of the Muslim schools don't accept that, because they say, salat is khayrun min lots of things, like the least of which is sleep. But for muqtada al-hal at Fajr, that's the most appropriate thing to remind people that it's better of. Like if you were eating, it would be khayrun min al-akal, or something. But here you're sleeping. So that rhetoric is always looking at What are the most appropriate words in the given situation that you're in? So now we can look at another aspect of the repetition, what appears to be repetition, but like I said. So if you look at the beginning of the Quran, Alif Lam Mim, ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين, or لا ريب, stop, فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. So here, Alif Lam Mim, this is the book of Allah. There is no doubt therein. It is a guidance for the God-fearing, the people of taqwa, those who believe in the realms of the unseen, who duly establish the prayer set by God, and who spend charitably out of what we have provided them, and those who further believe in this Quran, they're sent down. Now, there's no doubt, right? And then Allah gives the three types of people, but then He talks about the people في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا, about the hypocrites, the 13 ayahs that deal with the hypocrites, and then the sufaha. And then he goes on, and then it says, if you're in doubt about this book, right? So this is all about removing doubt, and then the proofs for that. Now, if you look at 31. So in chapter 31, Luqman, Alif Lam Mim, same letters. And these are called the huruf al-muqatta'a. These are, somebody put the words together and in different sentences, and the words, the sentences they make are all very interesting, because they're all things like nassun hakimun qati'un lahu sir. So those are all the muqatta'at. And the muqatta'at, we don't know what they mean. But part of what they mean to me is, if you study linguistics, in linguistics they make an argument that phonemes, right, the foundation of language, the building blocks of language, which are these basic sounds that we make, a, e, u, right, ba, bi, bu, all these sounds that we make, and then the diphthongs like oi, boy, that these are meaningless, and it's only once they are brought together do they begin to comprise meaning. This shows you its meaning all the way down. So the foundation of, according to these people, the very building blocks of meaning are meaningless, whereas the Quran is saying no, it's meaning all the way down. It's Alif Lam Mim, like even the letters have meanings. So we're the people of meaning. I mean, this is our. So in Luqman, Alif Lam Mim, tilka ayatul kitab al-hakim. So now it's saying ayat. It's not saying the dhalika al-kitab. It's tilka, and then it's using again like dhalika, tilka ayatul kitab al-hakim. Hudan wa rahmatan lil muhsinin. So now instead of hudan lil muttaqin, it's hudan wa rahma. Now this is the chapter of Luqman, and what's Luqman doing? He's giving guidance to his son, which is the ultimate act of ihsan to your child, and he is al-Hakim. So Allah begins the surah that is about hikmah and about the love of your child and the ihsan that you have. This is what he's saying. Huda wa rahmatan lil muhsinin alladhina yuqimuna as-salat. So they're doing the same things. وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ يُوقِنُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَىٰ هُدًى مِّن رَّبِّهِمْ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. All the same thing. And then وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ لِيُضِلَّ عَن سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. So now there's these other people. Again, these are like the kuffar. So, but it's different because here, lahu al-hadith is now juxtaposed with the hadith al-hakim, like the speech of the hakim. So Luqman doesn't have lahu al-hadith. So, and then يتخذها هزؤا أولئك لهم عذاب مهين وإذا تتلى عليه آياتنا قال الذين أوتوا العلم والإيمان لقد لبثت. No, that's the other way. ولا مستكبرة. They turn away out of arrogance. كأن لم يسمعها كأن في أذنيه وقرا. As if their ears are filled with فَبَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. So these again are like the people in Baqarah that Allah talks about, the hypocrites. So this is wa'id. So you can see here, this is the wa'id now. And before it's giving you all of these ayahs. And then when he says, he's showing how we created the heavens, the earth, and now it's all displaying the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when it gets to وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةِ, so we taught him wisdom, goes back to the beginning of the verses. And then what's the greatest wisdom? To be grateful, right? So أَنَشْكُرْ لِلَّهِ وَمَنْ يَشْكُرْ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ. So whoever is grateful for himself. وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ حَمِيدٌ. And if you're ungrateful, just know Allah doesn't need you. And then وَإِذْ قَالَ لُقْمَانُ لِإِبْنِهِ وَهُوَ يَعِظُهُ يَا بُنَيَّ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّ الشِّرْكَ لَظُلْمٌ عَظِيمٌ وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ. Now see, here's the walid. So now he's telling you, honor your parents, because your parents very often have wisdom to teach you, and they also care about you because they're the ultimate muhsinun alayka. Nobody is more muhsina alayka. Nobody shows more ihsan, goodness and charity and love and kindness than your mother and then your father. So why does immediately after that, hamalatu ummuhu, right? So he says, be good to your parents. We're counseling you to treat your parents properly, and then reminding you, hamalatu ummuhu wahnan ala wahn, sapped and weakened, she bore you. You drained all that energy from her. That's because all of her energy was going to this extraordinary creation. I mean, from the sunan of Allah. وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ, reminding you that you were anashkur li wali walidayk. There, that's an tafsir. That all of this is that you thank Allah and that you thank your parents, right? I mean, it's amazing that wow there. Like, thank Allah and thank your parents. I mean, subhanallah. So this is the maqam of the parents is immense. And then وَإِنْ جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. Even if they're against your guidance, still treat them with ma'ruf, with what's right, with virtue, with honor, right? ثم إلي مرجعكم, right? So everything, وصاحبهما في الدنيا معروفة واتبع السبيل من أناب إلي ثم إلي مرجعكم, you're coming back to me, فأنبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. And then we go back to Allah telling us what Luqman said. He says to his son, should there be any deed, even if it's only be the weight of a grain or a mustard seed, and though it be concealed in a rock, in the high heavens, in the deep earth, Allah will bring it forth. Indeed, Allah is subtle, all aware. My dear son, establish prayer, enjoin what is right, command the right and forbid the evil. Be patient with whatever afflicts you. The ulama say that he's saying that aqim as-salat wa'mar bil ma'ruf wanha 'anil munkar wasbir 'ala ma asabak. And be patient, because when you do amr bil ma'ruf and nahi 'anil munkar, people are going to react to it. إن ذلك من عزم الأمور ولا تسعر أو تساعر خدك للناس ولا تمشي في الأرض مرحا. Don't show people contempt by turning your away from them, and don't, in other words, don't be arrogant, right? And don't walk on the earth haughtily, exultant, proud. إن الله لا يحب كل مختال فخور. Allah does not love those who are swaggering or boastful. وَقْصِدْ فِي مَشْيِكَ, be modest in your walk. وَغْضُضْ مِنْ صَوْتِكَ, and lower your voice. إِنَّ أَنْكَرَ الْأَصْوَاتِ إِلَى صَوْتِ الْحَمِيرِ. These are all wisdoms, right? And then, haven't you seen how Allah subjugated everything in the heavens? أَلَمْ تَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ سَخَّرَ لَكُم مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Everything in the heavens and earth has been subjugated for you. These are all reasons to worship. Now He's giving you the reasons why. This is telling you why you should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا هُدًى وَلَا كِتَابٍ مُنِيرٍ. And if you say to these people who argue without any guidance, if you say to them, follow what's been sent down, right? No, we follow what we found our ancestors doing. And it says, even if shaitan is calling you to a hell, like you're going to just go astray. So it goes on, right? So, I mean, these are all, mashallah, it's all reminding you of why you should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the very end, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم واخشوا يوما لا يجزي والد عن ولده. Luqman cannot help his son if he doesn't follow his guidance. So, fear that day when you're going to have to go back to your Lord, right? ولا مولود هو جاز عن والده شيئا إن وعد الله حق. And then don't get deluded, because shaitan, he's out there to delude you, right? So those are all examples of where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there's reasons why He's putting one against the other. And you'll see this in many, many chapters. Also, the beginning, always with the end, is very interesting in the Quran. So whatever the beginning is and follows the end. And then, inshallah, I want to look at using this template now, because now you have all 7, right? The rububiyyah, nabuwah, the wa'ad, the ma'ad, the ahkam, the wa'ad, the wa'id, and the qasas. So these 7 become a template for you to really understand every verse in the Quran. Some of the verses might have more than one in them, but generally these are the 7 templates that you're able to see. In Imam al-Ghazali's, which I'll get into in the coming classes, he has a slightly different methodology. It's based on the same. He's just, it's like Jesus took the 10 commandments and folded them up into 2, right? Because the 10 commandments are about obedience to God and then just being good to others, right? Don't kill, don't steal, don't covet other people's goods, right? Don't lie. That's all. So he just reduced it down to, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Like, it's the same 10 commandments. And so that's what al-Ghazali does with these 7. He folds them into 2. So that's an example just of some of the repetitions and the wisdoms in the repetitions that are all very fascinating. And now, if Nabil or Jude or Anas have any questions in Dr. Sanusi's house.
Bismillah. Barakallahu feekum. Thank you so much. The first question that we'll take is from Sarah, who is asking, what are the rational proofs of prophecy? Are the miracles of the prophets the strongest proofs of their prophethood?
Well, they're temporal miracles, and then there's miracles that stay with us. One of the greatest miracles of the Prophet ﷺ is the Sahaba. Because if you just study the lives of the Sahaba, how do you get all those people at the same time in one place? Men and women, some of the most extraordinary people that ever lived. I mean, Umar ibn al-Khattab, in the 100 most influential people in human history, Umar ibn al-Khattab is in there, according to the Prophet ﷺ, according to the historian Michael Hart, was number 1. And he was Jewish historian. I think he was being very fair. But he puts Omar in there also as one of the most influential. I mean, how is that possible? Omar is a product of prophetic molding. So the transformation of, the alchemical transformation of lead to gold that occurs amongst the companions of the Prophet. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, from a tribe of really brigands, and just becomes so upright that he can't even live with people anymore. I mean, it's just amazing. Or somebody like Aisha. Aisha had the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, we can't even imagine it, but, had the Prophet ﷺ never come, who is Aisha? Aisha, nobody would ever know a name like Aisha bint Abi Bakr, and yet she's one of the most important women in human history. And she's influenced countless people, men and women. So she's amazing. So, I mean, the greatest miracle, according to our tradition, is the Quran itself. But to understand that miracle takes a considerable amount of time to really, to penetrate its mysteries and get, I mean, to penetrate some of its mysteries and get a glimpse of it. It takes a long time. But the more you study, the more miraculous it becomes. That's undeniable. But one of the great miracles of the Quran is the fact that the Ajam can memorize it without knowing what it means. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهْلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. And we made this book easy to remember. And you see people that memorize it perfectly. And then another miracle of the Quran is tajweed. Because why is it that people, I've met Pakistanis that can't speak Arabic except with an accent, and yet they can recite the Quran with perfect tajweed. It's amazing. I mean, how is it that people can learn? And then also how is it, we don't know how the Torah was originally recited at the time of Moses. We don't know how the Greek of the New Testament was recited. And I had 2 years of Greek, and the Greek teacher told us on more than one occasion, you know, we think it was pronounced this way, we don't know. So even the Greek, Koine Greek of the New Testament is we don't have a tajweed of it, like orthoepy, I think they call it. So tajweed is a miracle of Islam. And then the Prophet ﷺ's, like, where do you get the Taj Mahal and the Alhambra Palace? I mean, how is it that beauty, Western beauty of Islam, Spain, when they show brochures to visit Spain, they show the Alhambra Palace. That was built by Muslims, it wasn't built by Christians. And then when they show Hindus, when they show their tourist things to visit India, they show a Muslim mosque. And then the Jews, when they show their brochures to visit Israel, they show a mosque that Muslims built. Like, how is the, why, what's so amazing about it? Because it's what civilization created those. Like, what was in the souls of those people that came out of them? Early on, too. I mean, Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan, that's very early. And I heard a lecture on Al-Quds, you know, because, I mean, even though we know Masjid al-Aqsa is actually another part of the mount, but the Bayt al-Maqdis, you know, where the prophets had the Isra and the Mi'raj. Rather, it was the Isra was to it, and then the Mi'raj was from it. But so I heard this amazing architect in Colorado, and he was a student of Keith Critchlow, who's a famous sacred geometrician that studied Islamic art. And he was explaining how this is almost a perfect building. There's only one problem architecturally. There's not an intermediary. Because if you look at most buildings, they would have a little, between the dome and the base, there would be an intermediary. So that's like heaven and earth, and then you have an intermediary. So when he finished the lecture, I went up to him and I said, you know, I think you're totally wrong about that. He said, what? He said, well, I mean, architecturally, we would see that as a flaw in the structure because that intermediary base wasn't there. I said, but that mosque symbolizes a man who went to heaven and had no intermediary, because even Jibril had to leave him. And so it's actually perfect if you want to, it's the meeting of heaven and earth. So he was like, that's a very interesting point. So anyway, I think those are miracles of our prophet. And Dalail and Nubuwwah was very important. But another miracle is all of his incredible statements about the end of time. Incredible, I say incredible, but they're credible for us. We believe them. They might be incredible for other people. Because incredible means unbelievable, but we believe them. But I'm using it hyperbolically. So anyway, the Prophet ﷺ told us, who told the Prophet that the buildings in Mecca would reach the tips of the mountains? Like, who could have imagined that in the 7th century, to have skyscrapers that reached the tips of the mountains? Who told the Prophet ﷺ that the mountains of Mecca would have tunnels. إِذَا بُعِجَتْ كَظَائِمُ مَكَّةَ. I mean, that's in a hadith. When the mountains of Mecca, when the base is drilled open, bu'ijat means to like pierce, right? So who told the Prophet ﷺ that? Who told the Prophet ﷺ that women would wear spandex towards the latter days? Because they didn't understand that hadith, kasiyatun ariyat, dressed and undressed at the same time. We understand that, unfortunately, right? I mean, we understand that. But who would have understood that in the 7th century Arabia? Read the tafsir, they didn't understand it. They're like, how could you be dressed and naked at the same time? So they said things like, kasiyat fi dunya, ariyat fil akhirah. Everybody's ariyat fil akhirah on the Day of Judgment. We now know what that means. The Prophet ﷺ said that people would walk in marketplaces, badiyatul afkhad, with their thighs bare. Civilized people never do that. Primitive people don't create marketplaces. Primitive people barter. You know, they live they don't have marketplaces. That's the difference between civilized, one of the differences between civilized and, so he's talking about people in aswaq, in malls, walking with shorts on. Who told the Prophet ﷺ? I mean, there's so many things that he said. Who told him that destitute Bedouin would be vying with one another to build tall buildings in the Arabian desert? Who told him that all this money would come to the Arabian Peninsula? Who told him that the Arabian Peninsula would be turned into gardens and have green, I mean, it was desert. Like now you go and you can see these amazing gardens. I mean, they actually have skiing in Dubai. Like they have snow. So all these things, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, he told all these things, and I'm just like, you read the signs of the end of time and you're like, it's not like Nostradamus, you know, where it has to be interpreted. These are like clear signs. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ said that children, he said, al-mataru sayakunu qayda, like rain would be acidic. Qayd means to burn. Who told him about acid rain? And then who told him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about, I mean, we know, I'm just saying rhetorically, you know, that these for us, these are all signs. He said, وَالْوَلَدُ غَيْذَ, the child would be filled with rage. Children would be filled with rage. It's amazing. And he said, يَفِيضُ اللِّئَامُ فَيْضَ وَيَغِيظُ الْكِرَامُ غَيْظ. He said that the low people would be everywhere. And he said noble people would diminish. They would just begin to disappear. He said, how will you be when you're amongst the leftovers of humanity? Like the party's over. It's all the crumbs and the scraps. I mean, just look how people dress. Look how people have always dressed nobly throughout human history. Nobody ever dressed like modern people. Nobody in history. Romans had togas. You know, the Persians had their robes. You know, all these people, I mean, even native peoples had their feathers and because they knew, they had some sense of what human beings are. Now people walking around, they walk around they pay hundreds of dollars for rags. They pay hundreds of dollars for rags. What's happened to human beings that this is their state? I mean, you have to marvel at the leftovers. It's just amazing. But there were days, I mean, look, there were days when heroes walked the earth. Like now, they want to, every hero they just have to tear down. Everybody of any distinction, they have to tear them down. They have to destroy them. They have to expose them, show how they're just like everybody else. There's nothing special about them. You know, this is a sickness of people. It's all this leveling. And you know, there were great people, and I've sat with sanctified souls. I know it. I've been in their company. I've been in their presence. I've felt their hal, you know. So these are real. They're real. And the awliya are real. The people of Allah are real. And the lovers of the Prophet ﷺ, they know what they have, and they know what they have in their hearts. And the people that don't have that, they don't know. But Abu Hanifa said, if kings knew what we had, they would send their armies to take it from us. You know, so I mean, I feel sorry for people that don't have that. I really do. And the Quran says some of them wish they could believe like you believe. So don't realize what you have is precious. Don't squander it. And then people say, you know, I'm having a hard time with my faith. What? Like, what? Have you read history? Like, people used to get sawed in half. Christians were eaten by the lions. You know, I mean, like, what kind of faith do you have that, like, you lost your job and suddenly you don't believe in God? You know, or your child got sick. Who gave you the child in the first place? Like, where did it come from? And how do you know what's good for you and what's bad? How do you know if that child, it's better they leave the world now than stay in the world? You don't know. Who are you to decide these things? All these things, we're people of submission. Our religion, we don't challenge God. We're not people who wrestle with God. You know, musara'at. We don't know. We surrender. Allahu Akbar, I give up. You know, like, don't shoot. And it's because Allah wants good for us. It's like it's sweet surrender. It's not bitter surrender. It's not like I lose. It's you win by surrendering. This is like the opposite of surrendering in dunya. In dunya, you lose when you surrender. In our religion, you win when you surrender. Assalamu alaikum. Barakallahu fikum. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sanusi and his family. May Allah bless you and bless all the people here, and may Allah forgive us and overlook our shortcomings and sins. If we said anything incorrect, may Allah forgive us. And astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.